They told her she was dangerous, unnatural, a threat to the galaxy, so they locked her away and called it science. But behind every subject is a story, and behind every experiment is a lie. This is the moment the truth escapes. The harsh, sterile lights of the laboratory flickered, casting eerie shadows across Virelia's blue skin. Her silver eyes, once vibrant with life, now dulled by months of captivity, stared blankly at the ceiling. The cold metal restraints bit into her wrists and ankles, a constant reminder of her imprisonment on the hostile planet of Drakkar. Virelia's mind wandered to her home world, Virelia, a paradise of lush forests and crystal-clear lakes. She longed for the warmth of her family's embrace, the laughter of her young son echoing through their dwelling. But here, in this sterile prison, those memories seemed like a distant dream. The door to her chamber hissed open, and Virelia's body tensed instinctively. Dr. Malric, the lead researcher, entered with his usual cold demeanor. His eyes gleamed with a mixture of fascination and cruel curiosity as he approached her. "Good morning, Subject A7, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I trust you're ready for today's experiments." Virelia remained silent, her defiance the only weapon left in her arsenal. Dr. Malric sighed, picking up a nearby datapad. "Your psychic abilities continue to intrigue us," he mused, scrolling through the information. "The Nyrian race truly is remarkable. If only you'd cooperate more willingly, we could advance our understanding so much faster." Virelia's silver eyes flashed with anger. "I am not your lab rat," she spat, her voice raspy from long silence. "My people are not here for your unethical obsession." Dr. Malric's lips curled into a cold smile. "Oh, but you are, my dear, and you will be until we unlock every secret your race holds." As he reached for a nearby syringe filled with a glowing blue liquid, the room suddenly shook violently. Alarms blared and the lights flickered erratically. Dr. Malric stumbled, dropping the syringe, which shattered on the floor. "What in the—" he began, but was cut off as an explosion rocked the facility. The door to Virelia's chamber blew open in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Through the smoke and debris stepped a figure Virelia had never seen before, a man, tall and lean with determination etched across his face. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "Who are you?" Virelia whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos. The man moved swiftly to her side, his hand working to release her restraints. "My name is Kyle," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I'm here to get you out." As the last restraint fell away, Virelia felt a surge of hope she hadn't experienced in months. She sat up, rubbing her wrists, her mind racing with questions. "Why? Why would you risk this for me?" Kale's eyes softened for a moment. "Because no sentient being should endure what you have. Now come on, we don't have much time." Dr. Malric, who had been momentarily stunned by the explosion, suddenly lunged at Kyle. "You fool," he yelled. "Do you have any idea what you're interfering with?" Kyle reacted instantly, dodging Dr. Malric's wild swing and delivering a swift punch to the scientist's solar plexus. As Dr. Malric doubled over, gasping for air, Kale grabbed Virelia's hand. "Can you run?" he asked urgently. Virelia nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Together they sprinted out of the chamber and into the turmoil-stricken corridors of the facility. Alarms blared all around them as they navigated the maze-like structure. Virelia's heightened Nyrian senses were on full alert, picking up the smallest sounds and movements. "Left," she yelled suddenly, pulling Kale down an adjacent hallway, just as a group of armed guards rounded the corner behind them. Laser fire erupted, scorching the walls where they had just been standing. Kyle pulled out a small stun device, returning fire and forcing the guards to take cover. "Nice call," he said, flashing Virelia a quick grin. "Your senses are impressive." Virelia felt a strange warmth at his compliment, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. As they continued their frantic escape, she found herself tapping into abilities she didn't know she possessed. When another group of guards appeared in front of them, Virelia instinctively threw up her hands. To her amazement, a shimmering energy shield materialized, deflecting the incoming laser fire. Kael's eyes widened in awe. "That's incredible," he breathed. Virelia stared at her hands in disbelief. I didn't know I could do that." "Well, I'm glad you can," Kael said, taking advantage of the guard's surprise to stun them with his stun device. "Let's keep moving." As they made their way through the facility, Virelia's newfound ability proved invaluable. She created shields to protect them from hostile fire, used her energy to short-circuit security systems, and even managed to push back a group of scientists who tried to block their path. Finally, they reached the hangar bay. Kael quickly disabled the security locks on a sleek, unmarked ship. "This is our ride out of here," he said, ushering Virelia inside. As they strapped themselves in, Virelia turned to Kael, her silver eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "I still don't understand why you're doing this. You don't even know me." Kael's hands flew over the ship's controls, preparing for takeoff. "I've seen too much injustice in this galaxy," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "When I learned about what was happening here, about you, I couldn't stand by and do nothing." The ship's engines roared to life, and they shot out of the hangar just as reinforcements arrived. Virelia watched through the viewport as the facility, her prison for so long, grew smaller and smaller until it was just a speck on the planet's surface. As they broke through Xeris' atmosphere and into the vast expanse of space, Virelia felt tears streaming down her face. She was free. After months of captivity and suffering, she was finally free. Kael set the ship on an automated course and turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" Virelia nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes, thank you. I don't know how I can ever repay you for this." Kael shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad we got you out of there." He paused, then asked gently, "Do you have somewhere to go, family?" At the mention of family, Virelia's heart clenched. "My home, my planet, area. I have a son there. I haven't seen him in so long." Her voice broke, overwhelmed by emotion. Kael reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Then that's where we'll go. I'll make sure you get back to your family safely." Virelia looked at him, her silver eyes shimmering with gratitude. "You would do that for me?" Kael nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Of course. It's the least I can do." As they set course for Virelia, Virelia felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She was going home, but after everything she'd been through, would things ever be the same? The journey to Virelia took several days, during which Virelia and Kael grew closer. She told him about her home, her people, and her son. In turn, Kael shared stories of his life as a rebel, fighting against injustice across the galaxy. One evening, As they sat in the ship's small common area, Veralia asked the question that had been on her mind since their escape. "Kael, how did you know about me? About what was happening on Xerus?" Kael's expression grew serious. "I have contacts throughout the galaxy. One of them intercepted communications about a secret research facility on Xerus. When I learned they were experimenting on sentient beings, I knew I had to act." Veralia nodded, her gaze distant. "There were others there, weren't there? Other Akailians?" Kyle's silence was answer enough. Veralia felt a wave of guilt wash over her. "We have to go back for them," she said, her voice filled with determination. Kyle leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. "We will," he promised. "But first, we need to get you home safely. We'll need help if we're going to free the others." Veralia nodded, understanding the logic, but still feeling the weight of leaving others behind. As they continued their journey, she focused on honing her newfound abilities, creating and manipulating energy shields with increasing skill. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they exited hyperspace and Veralia appeared on the horizon. Veralia's breath caught in her throat at the sight of her home planet, a swirling blue and green orb suspended in the vastness of space. "It's beautiful," Kael murmured, glancing at Veralia. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It is. I've dreamed of this moment for so long." As they began their descent through the atmosphere, however, Veralia's excitement turned to unease. The planet below seemed unnaturally quiet, the usual bustling air traffic conspicuously absent. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her silver eyes wide with concern. Kyle frowned, checking the ship's sensors. "I'm not picking up any communication signals. It's like everything's gone silent." They landed in a clearing near Veralia's hometown, the ship settling onto the soft grass with a gentle thud. As the hatch opened, Veralia stepped out, her bare feet touching Iran's soil for the first time in months. But instead of the joyous homecoming she had imagined, she was met with an eerie silence. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ash, and a fine layer of dust covered everything in sight. Veralia's heart raced as she took in the abandoned streets and empty buildings. "Where is everyone?" she whispered, her voice barely audible as she clutched Kael's hand. Kael squeezed her hand reassuringly, his eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of life or danger. "I don't know," he replied softly. "But we'll find out. We'll find your people, Veralia. I promise." They moved cautiously through the deserted town, each empty home an abandoned storefront, adding to the growing knot of dread in Veralia's stomach. In a small park, they came across a child's toy, a small holographic projector lying forgotten in the dust. Veralia picked it up, her fingers trembling as she activated it. A flickering image appeared, a young Nerean child, her blue skin and silver eyes, so much like Veralia's own. The child's face was marked by fear as she spoke urgently. "If anyone finds this, please help. They came from the sky, took everyone. We're hiding, but I don't know for how long. Please, if you're out there." The message cut off abruptly, leaving Veralia and Kael in stunned silence. "Who could have done this?" Kael asked, his voice tight with anger. Veralia shook her head, her mind racing. "I don't know, but..." She paused, a memory surfacing. "There's a place we can go, an ancient refuge known only to a few Nyrians. If anyone survived, they might have gone there." Kael nodded. "Lead the way. They made their way north towards the dense forests that bordered the main city. As they traveled, Virelia's hope began to fade. The destruction they witnessed was overwhelming. Entire villages reduced to ash. Vast swaths of forest burned to the ground. Finally, after hours of trekking through the wilderness, they reached a nondescript hillside. To the untrained eye, it looked like any other part of the forest, but Virelia knew better. She placed her hand on a seemingly ordinary rock, and a faint blue glow emanated from her palm. With a low rumble, a hidden door slid open, revealing a dark passageway leading underground. Virelia hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, Kyle close behind her. As they descended into the earth, Virelia noticed a faint energy trail. Someone had passed through here recently. Her heart began to race with renewed hope. The narrow, dimly lit corridors twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the ancient refuge. After what felt like hours, they began to hear muffled sounds echoing from somewhere ahead. Virelia and Kyle exchanged a hopeful glance before quickening their pace. Rounding a corner, they suddenly found themselves in a large cavern, dimly lit by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. And there, huddled together in small groups, were dozens of Nereians, survivors of whatever catastrophe had befallen their world. Virelia's eyes frantically scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces. Suddenly, a small voice cried out, "Mom!" One time seemed to stand still as Virelia's gaze locked onto a young boy, his face smudged with dust and his eyes brimming with tears. It was her son, Riven. "Mom!" he cried again, breaking free from the group and running towards her. Virelia fell to her knees, arms outstretched as Riven ran into her arms. She held him tightly, feeling his small body shake with sobs. "I knew you'd come back," he whispered, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I knew it." Virelia stroked his hair, her own tears falling freely. "I'm here, my love. I'm here now." Kyle watched the reunion with a mixture of joy and sadness, realizing that their fight was far from over. The survivors gathered around, their faces a mix of relief, hope, and fear. An elderly Nereian stepped forward, his silver eyes clouded with age, but still sharp. "Virelia," he said, his voice gravelly. "We feared you were lost to us." Virelia stood, keeping one arm around Riven. "Elder Callus," she said, bowing her head slightly. "I was captured, but I escaped. This is Kyle." She gestured to her companion. "He saved me and brought me home." Kyle nodded respectfully to the elder. "Can you tell us what happened here?" Elder Callus's face darkened. "They came without warning. Ships descended from the sky, unleashing destruction unlike anything we've ever seen. They took many of our people. For what purpose we do not know, those of us who could fled here." "How long ago?" Virelia asked, her mind racing. 3 lunar cycles, the elder replied. "We've been hiding, waiting, hoping for a chance to reclaim our world." Virelia looked at Kyle, determination burning in her silver eyes. "We can't let this stand. We have to fight back to reclaim our home." Kyle nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I was hoping you'd say that. But we'll need a plan, and we'll need to prepare." And over the next few days, Virelia and Kyle worked tirelessly with the survivors to formulate a strategy. Virelia taught the other Nereians how to harness their psychic energy to create protective barriers, while Kyle shared his tactical knowledge and combat skills. As they prepared, Virelia spent every spare moment with Riven, making up for lost time and marveling at how much he had grown. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet corner of the cavern, Riven looked up at her with curious eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "are we going to be okay?" Virelia pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "We're going to fight, my love, and we're going to win. I promise you, we'll make our home safe again." As their preparations neared completion, Virelia found herself standing at the entrance to the underground refuge, gazing out at the starry sky. Kyle approached, standing silently beside her for a moment before speaking. "Are you ready for this?" he asked gently. Virelia took a deep breath, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "I have to be," she replied. "For Riven, for my people, for all of us." Kale reached out, taking her hand in his. The gesture was simple, but it conveyed a depth of understanding and support that words couldn't express. Virelia felt a warmth spread through her at his touch, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Whatever happens," Kyle said softly, "we face it together." Virelia nodded, squeezing his hand. "Together." As the twin moons of Virelia rose over the horizon, casting their pale light over the scared landscape, Virelia and Kyle led the Nyrian survivors out of their underground refuge. The air was thick with tension and anticipation as they moved silently through the forest, their blue skin blending seamlessly with the shadows. Virelia's heart raced as they approached the outskirts of the main city. The once bustling metropolis now stood as a haunting reminder of the invasion, its towering structures partially collapsed and eerily silent. In the distance, they could see the invaders' ships, sleek and menacing, hovering above the city center. Kyle signaled for the group to halt, his keen eyes scanning the area. "Remember the plan," he whispered. "We need to disable their communication array first. That should buy us some time before reinforcements arrive." Virelia nodded, turning to address the group. "This is our home," she said, her voice low, but filled with conviction. "They may have superior technology, but we have something they don't. Our connection to this world, to each other. Use your abilities, trust in yourselves and each other. We can do this." With a series of hand signals, Kale divided the group into smaller teams. Virelia led one group towards the communication array, while Kyle took another towards the invaders' main compound. The remaining Akalians spread out, ready to create diversions and provide support. As they crept through the abandoned streets, Virelia felt a surge of energy coursing through her. She reached out with her mind, sensing the faint psychic signatures of her people scattered throughout the city. Many were being held in makeshift prisons, their energies muted, but still present. "They're alive," she whispered to her team, hope blossoming in her chest. "Many of our people are still alive." They reached the base of the towering communication array, its pulsing lights casting an eerie glow over the surrounding area. Virelia closed her eyes, concentrating on the energy flowing through her. With a gesture, she created a shimmering energy shield around her team, protecting them from the watchful eyes of the invaders' patrols. "Now," she whispered. The Akalians moved swiftly, their hands glowing with psychic energy as they began to dismantle the array. Virelia stood guard, her senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Suddenly an alarm blared through the city. Virelia's heart jumped to her throat as she saw a group of invaders rushing towards their position. "Keep working," she yelled to her team. "I'll hold them off." Virelia stepped forward, her hands outstretched. As the invaders opened fire, she channeled all her energy, into creating the strongest shield she had ever attempted. The air crackled with power as their weapon blasts dissipated harmlessly against her barrier. The effort was immense, and Veralia felt her strength waning. Just as she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, a familiar voice called out behind her. "Veralia, duck!" She dropped to the ground as Kyle and his team emerged from the shadows, unleashing a barrage of suppressing fire on the invaders. The alien soldiers scattered, taken by surprise by the coordinated attack. Kale rushed to Verelia's team, helping her to her feet. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Veralia nodded, catching her breath. "The array disabled," one of her team members confirmed. "Their long-range communications are down." A cheer went up among the Acalians, but Kale's expression remained serious. "This is just the beginning," he warned. "They'll regroup quickly. We need to move on to the next phase." As if on cue, the ground shook as explosions erupted across the city. The diversionary teams had begun their assault, drawing the invaders' attention away from the main objectives. Veralia and Kyle led their combined teams towards the central compound where most of the captured Acalians were being held. As they approached, they could see the chaos unfolding, invaders rushing to defend their positions, alarms blaring, and the sky lit up with weapon blasts. "This is it," Veralia said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Everything we've prepared for comes down to this moment." Kyle nodded, his eyes meeting hers. In that brief moment, 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. Trust, determination, and something deeper that neither had dared to acknowledge yet. "Together," Kyle asked, extending his hand. Veralia took it, feeling strength flow between them. "Together," she affirmed. With a shared nod, they led the charge towards the compound. Verelia's energy shield expanded, enveloping their entire group as they advanced. The invaders' weapons fire ricocheted off the shimmering barrier. Their alien faces twisted in confusion and fear at the sight of the advancing Acalians. As they neared the compound's entrance, Veralia felt her strength waning. Maintaining such a large shield was taking its toll. Sensing her struggle, Kyle squeezed her hand. "You've got this," he encouraged. "Just a little further." Drawing strength from his words and the determination of her people, Veralia pushed on. With a final burst of energy, she expanded the shield, creating an opening in the compound's defenses. The Acalians poured through, engaging the invaders in close combat. Inside the compound, chaos reigned. Alarms blared, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of weapon blasts. Veralia and Kyle fought one by side, her energy manipulation complementing his combat skills perfectly. As they battled their way deeper into the facility, they began to encounter holding cells filled with captured Nyrians. Verelia's heart soared at the sight of her people, battered but alive. "Free them!" she yelled to her team. "Get them out of here!" As the liberated Nyrians joined the fight, the tide began to turn. The invaders, caught off guard by the prisoners' sudden reinforcement, began to fall back. Veralia and Kale pressed on, fighting their way towards the central control room. If they could take control of the facility systems, they could turn the invaders' own defenses against them. As they approached the heavily guarded entrance to the control room, Veralia felt a sudden overwhelming presence in her mind. She stumbled, nearly falling if not for Kayel's quick reflexes. "Veralia?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, trying to clear the fog from her mind. Someone powerful is in there. I can feel them." Kale's expression hardened. "The leader?" Veralia nodded, her silver eyes filled with determination. "Let's end this." With a shared look of resolve, they burst into the control room. Inside, they found a scene of frantic activity as alien technicians worked desperately at their consoles. At the center of it all stood a tall, imposing figure, clearly the leader of the invasion force. The alien commander turned to face them, its multifaceted eyes gleaming with malice. "So," it hissed in a voice that seemed to echo in Veralia's mind, "the primitives think they can reclaim their world." Veralia stepped forward, her hands glowing with energy. "This is our home," she declared, "and you are not welcome here." The commander laughed, an eerie laugh that sent shivers down Veralia's spine. "Your world, your people, they are nothing more than resources to be harvested. Your psychic abilities will serve us well in our conquest of this galaxy." Rage boiled within Veralia at the commander's words. With a cry of resolve, she unleashed a blast of psychic energy. The alien leader staggered back, clearly surprised by the force of her attack. What followed was a battle unlike anything Veralia had ever experienced. As Kael engaged the other aliens in the room, she found herself locked in a psychic duel with the commander. Their minds clashed, each trying to overwhelm the other. Veralia could feel the alien's vast experience and cruel intellect, but she had something it didn't, a connection to her world and her people. She drew strength from the very essence of Veralia, from the love of her son, and from the unwavering support of Kael. The battle raged on, both physical and mental. Veralia could feel her strength ebbing, but she refused to give in. With a final desperate push, she channeled all of her being into one last attack. The alien commander's eyes widened in shock as Veralia's psychic assault broke through its defenses. With a piercing shriek that echoed through both the physical and mental realms, the alien leader collapsed, its mind shattered by the force of Veralia's attack. As the commander fell, a ripple of confusion and fear spread through the remaining invaders. Their psychic link with their leader severed, they found themselves suddenly directionless and vulnerable. Kael, having dispatched the last of the alien technicians, rushed to Veralia's side. She swayed on her feet, exhausted from the intense psychic battle. He caught her, supporting her weight as she struggled to remain conscious. "Veralia," he said urgently, "stay with me. We're not done yet." She nodded weakly, forcing her eyes to focus on the control panels before them. "We need to shut down their systems," she managed to say. Together they stumbled to the main console. Kael's fingers flew over the alien controls, his experience with various technologies proving invaluable. Veralia placed her hand on the console, using what remained of her psychic energy to interface with the alien systems. As one, they initiated a complete shutdown of the invaders' network. Across the city, alien weapons went silent. Force fields flickered and died, and ships lost power, falling rapidly from the sky. A great cheer rose up from the Naireans as they witnessed the invaders' technology failing around them. The tide had turned decisively in their favor. Veralia collapsed against Kael, her energy finally spent. He held her close, his eyes filled with concern and something deeper, a look that spoke of admiration, respect, and a growing affection. "We did it," she whispered, a faint smile on her lips. before she slipped into unconsciousness. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The remaining invaders, cut off from their technology and leadership, were swiftly rounded up. Those who surrendered were detained, while others fled in whatever craft they could still operate. Viralia drifted in and out of consciousness, her body and mind recovering from the immense strain of the battle. Each time she awoke, she found Kyle by her side, his presence a constant comfort. When she finally regained full awareness, she found herself in a makeshift medical facility set up in one of the few undamaged buildings in the city. Riven was curled up asleep next to her, his small hand clutching hers tightly. Kyle sat in a chair nearby, his head drooping in exhaustion. As if sensing her gaze, he stirred, his eyes meeting hers. "Welcome back," he said softly, a warm smile spreading across his face. Viralia returned the smile, her heart swelling with emotion. "How long was I out?" 3 days, Terran replied, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. "You gave us quite a scare." She reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude, "for everything." Terran squeezed her hand gently. "I told you we'd face it together." Over the next few weeks, as Viralia regained her strength, the true extent of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The Nyrians had not only repelled the invasion, but had also captured vast amounts of alien technology. With careful study, they began to understand and adapt these advanced systems for their own use. The process of rebuilding Viralia was slow but steady. Cities were reconstructed, forests replanted, and the scars of war gradually began to heal. Throughout it all, Viralia found herself at the center of her people's efforts, her actions during the battle having elevated her to a position of leadership. One evening, as the twin moons of Virilia cast their soft light over the partially rebuilt city, Viralia stood on a balcony overlooking the bustling streets below. She sensed Terran's approach before she heard him, a testament to the deep connection that had formed between them. "Credit for your thoughts?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. Viralia smiled, leaning slightly against him. "I was just thinking about how far we've come. A few months ago I was a prisoner, believing I'd never see my home again, and now you're a hero," Terran finished, a note of pride in his voice. She shook her head. "We're all heroes. Every Acalian who fought, every person who refused to give up hope, including you." Terran turned to face her, his expression serious. "Viralia, he began, then hesitated, seemingly struggling to find the right words. Viralia felt her heart quicken, sensing the weight of the moment. She reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. "What is it, Terran?" He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I came here to free you, to right a wrong. I never thought I'd find a home, a purpose, a family." Viralia's silver eyes shimmered with emotion as she listened, her hand tightening around his. Terran continued, his voice soft but firm. "I love you, Viralia. You and Riven, you've become everything to me. I want to stay, if you'll have me. Not just as a friend or an ally, but as your partner in every sense of the word." For a moment, Viralia was speechless, overwhelmed by the surge of emotions his words evoked. Then with a radiant smile, she stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Terran," she whispered, reaching up to cup his face with her free hand. You've been my partner since the moment you freed me from that cell. You've stood by me, protected me and my son, fought for my people as if they were your own. I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a culmination of all the unspoken feelings that had been building between them. As they embraced, Viralia felt a sense of completeness, of coming home in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Taran rested his forehead against hers. "So, what happens now?" he asked, a hint of playfulness in his voice. Viralia laughed softly, the sound full of joy and hope. "Now we build our future together." In the years that followed, Viralia flourished under the leadership of Viralia and Taran. The planet not only recovered from the invasion, but grew stronger, integrating the captured alien technology with their own unique abilities. The Nyrians developed advanced defenses to protect their world from future threats, while also reaching out to form alliances with other peaceful races in the galaxy. Viralia and Taran's love deepened with each passing day. They were married in a ceremony that combined Akkalian traditions with elements from Taran's own culture, symbolizing the union not just of two individuals, but of two worlds. Riven grew into a strong, compassionate young man, embodying the best qualities of both his mother and his adoptive father. And 3 years after the invasion, their family grew with the birth of a daughter, a blue-skinned, silver-eyed girl who inherited her father's determination and her mother's psychic abilities. As Viralia stood on the balcony of their home, cradling her newborn daughter while Taran played with Riven in the garden below, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From captivity to freedom, from despair to hope, from loneliness to love. It had been a path filled with challenges, but one that had led her to a joy she had never imagined possible. The twin moons of Viralia rose in the sky, casting their gentle light over the thriving planet. Viralia smiled, feeling the psychic energy of her world pulsing around her, stronger and more vibrant than ever before. She had found not just her home, but her purpose, her family, and a love that transcended the boundaries of worlds. As she gazed out at the city, now a harmonious blend of Akkalian architecture and adapted alien technology, Viralia felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges the future might hold, she knew they would face them together as a family, as a people, as guardians of a world reborn. In that moment, under the light of Viralia's moons, Viralia realized that her greatest adventure wasn't the battle they had won, or the invasion they had repelled. It was this, the life she was building, the love she shared, and the future they were creating day by day together.